We talk about our weakness, we beat ourselves up, and the truth is there's so many of us, and I'm this too sometimes, is we're just secret bullies. We don't bully other people because then we'd be found out. But Lord knows we bully ourselves. And I have a unique perspective on this. The reason is there was a lot of things wrong with me, in my opinion, as a kid. In fact, it got to a place where I needed to be tested. So I was tested by the state. And when you get tested by somebody that's going to give you like a diagnosis, you expect like a report, right? I mean, that's reasonable for us to believe. We would get a report. We got a packet. And in that packet, it talked about things like dyslexia and narcolepsy and some sensory stuff, and I had speech impediments and like all of this stuff. And the reality of my world at that point, being 11 years old, as an 11-year-old, because of my dyslexia and other stuff, I couldn't write my alphabet by myself without getting it wrong. Could not write it all the way through as an 11-year-old. Now, another problem about that and me being 11 is because when I was 11, I wasn't that much shorter than I am now. I just looked like a really emaciated grown man as an 11-year-old that couldn't write his alphabet. So I started telling myself some things, and I started identifying with the report more than I identified with, for instance, maybe what my parents would tell me. Like, son, you just think differently, or like, you just learn differently. But for me, the report was like scientific fact. And so from the time I was in middle school to the time I graduated high school, I never passed a grade on my own merit. I either went to summer school or the teacher just kind of pushed me through because they couldn't imagine a universe in which I was in their class again. And I get to college. Luckily, by the skin of my teeth, I had to redshirt my first year because I had to earn my first GPA. I was a basketball player. Luckily, there was someone that would take a chance and give me a scholarship. And the end of my first semester, I had achieved my first GPA. Now, what you may or may not know, depending on whether you follow college or you've ever played college sports, there's a clearinghouse that they decide the high standard by which athletes must perform academically in order for them to be able to play. That high standard is a 1.8 GPA. At the end of my first semester, I had achieved my first GPA, and it was only a 1.4, and they told me that wasn't quite as good as a 1.8. And so I had to go to my academic advisor's office. So her name was Sarah, and I walked in there, and just before I got through the doorway, Sarah points at me, and she goes, "You know what your problem is?" And as a guy, this September, I will be married 12 years to my wife. And I can tell you this, men, whether you're married or not, this is true. When a woman points at you and asks you if you know what your problem is, there's no need for you to answer. Because they intend to tell you. And so Sarah told me, she goes, "Your problem is that you're a victim of your own thinking." And she was right. And she went on to help me change my mind, and it completely changed my life. And here's what I've realized from that. I've realized that our weaknesses are just shadows. So follow me here. So this cup right here, this cup, there's a shadow, there's a light coming down here, there's shadow being cast back here. And so our weaknesses are like shadows. They only expose the truth of something that's more real and more tangible. And so for my entire childhood, here's what I looked at. I looked at the shadow and I said, gosh, I can't read well, I can't study, I can't make grades like the other kids, I'm probably not going to get out of school, like I don't know how successful I could possibly be. And so all these things, I looked at shadows for the vast majority of my life, my entire adolescence. But the truth is I never stopped to go, hey, maybe there's something more real that's being exposed there. And what I learned later is, gosh, I can't read worth a flip. I can't write well, but I can tell stories pretty good. You know, like there's a lot of things that I can't do, but the things that I can't do are only exposing the opposite of something that I do have strength in. And so we have a choice. We have a choice whether we're going to look at the real thing or we're going to look at just the shadow. Because when we want it both ways, and some of us at times we want it both ways. When we want it both ways, we end up falling victim to the same sin that got Adam and Eve kicked out of the garden. The sin of wanting to be like God. The sin of wanting to be different than we were created to be. And that's just not what it means to be human. What it means to be human is it means to be flawed. But it's a beautiful type of flawed. It's a type where you have things that are real, that are tangible, that are unique. And then as a consequence, there are things on the other end of that you're just naturally not going to be good at, and that should be okay. And the point of this whole thing is to say this. If you don't love yourself, if you don't care for yourself, then God's love for you will have little impact on you.